Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking and great to have you along for another episode of Dream Fights. And we've got another absolute cracker for you, fight for you this week, if I can spit that out. After our last episode a couple of weeks ago, which got heaps of feedback, this one I'm sure will get a fair bit as well. I'm going to introduce my co-host for this episode, Mike Altamura. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. Always an interesting concept, this one. We get to kind of calculate how we think fights amongst some of our favourite in the fight game will appear, and I think that this week we've got an absolute beauty for the fans.
Should be, mate. It's been a couple of weeks, of course, and we're just obviously having a bit of a laugh off air that we obviously get a few comments, or a lot of comments about the dream fights, and most of them positive. There are a few negative ones out there, which is cool. Everyone's got an opinion, but all we ask is, guys, we're not here to argue or tell other people that they don't know shit or whatever about boxing, as they say. It's just to have a bit of fun and discuss and friendly debate, have your opinion, but it does get a little bit funny sometime. But anyway, it's all good. We appreciate you guys tuning in each week because we have a lot of fun doing it, and this one will be big. Mike, we'll get to it first, then we'll get to the last episode because I want to talk to you about that as well. Who have we got this week?
We've got Diego Chico CORRALES against EDWIN Chapo Rosario.
I really like this one, Mike, because I was a big fan, mainly of Rosario. I really liked CORRALES, of course. It was a very courageous fight, as we all know, and in some absolute wars. But I was an 80s and 90s fight fan, I suppose, and I just remember Rosario being some of the big fights. I loved his style and was just a real, just a great advertisement for the sport, I suppose. He could punch, he could box. Excuse me. Ran into a couple of good fighters on the way, of course, but he was a great Puerto Rican fighter, and obviously Chico CORRALES was a great fighter as well.
I think that both these guys too have got very much they're similar tones to their careers in that they had some devastating losses and were considered down and out, and then come back to just about soar even higher on the comeback and look just as spectacular. But it would only be for a fleeting moment. They kind of had up and down. They never seemed to really string together. Once they got to the championship level, they never seemed to string together 4, 5, 6 solid performances together, but always bringing excitement in very, very different ways. Both of them, I think, peaked early. I think that Rosario really, peaked younger. He was world champion at 21.
Yep.
But both these guys, CORRALES had a tragic death, but really at the time of his death, he was on the way out anyways. I think that probably because of their lifestyles and also their all-action fight styles, both of them really had it's hard to figure out their peak, but their peaks were spectacular, but then I think the declines were going to be very, very tough. And of course, I say CORRALES passed away prematurely. I mean, Rosario passed away at what was it, 34, 35 years of age?
So
yeah, I was 97.
Yeah, it would have been maybe mid-30s, would he?
Maybe 36. Maybe 36
yeah,
it was.
36, 37, something like that, I think it was.
But he was still so young as well, and he was still fighting at that time, but his best days were long behind him, So I think that these guys, if we gauge them by their peaks at lightweight, it's a fight that's absolutely made to be one of the greatest fights of the century.
I think it'll be a great one too. But before we get on to that, Mike, I want to go back 2 weeks to our last episode. It was, of course, Lester Ellis, the Master Blaster, up against Robbie Bomber Pete. And I've got to say, we had the most votes and feedback that we've ever had from anyone out there, even more than when we did Jeff Fennick and Lester Ellis. So, because, of course, we're an Aussie show. But I'm going to put the results up and then we can chat about it. As I said, we had a massive amount of votes. I think it was about 250 votes or something. And the results were Robbie Peden, 55% over Lester Ellis, only 45%. But, Mike, I've got to say, this was neck and neck right up to probably the last couple of hours. The poll goes for 24 hours. But at one stage, it was 25% for a Peden KO, 25% for a Peden decision, 25% for an Ellis KO and 25% for an Ellis decision. That's how even it was. 25 times 4. It was amazing.
It just shows you how widespread our audience is and how diverse they are. And yeah, not a surprise that slight lean come in towards the end for Bomber Pete. And I think that there might be a bit more familiarity amongst more recent fight fans. But I can't argue with that because both of them legendary figures, both are good friends,
Great
and
guys.
it was that kind of fight. It was really a toss-up in both our minds heading in as well.
Well, I think I went for Bomber by decision. I think you went with Leicester by decision, didn't you?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
But both kind of perceived it to be what we figure a relatively close fight.
Oh, exactly. I would not be surprised if Leicester won, and I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised if Robbie won. It was just one of those types of fights. But I think what's good, you obviously know both guys well. I know Bomber really well, and he sort of took it in his stride and had a bit of a laugh about it. And he watched it straight away, and I think that was good because sometimes fighters, probably like footy players and whoever else, they sort of tend to get sort of lost or forgotten about a little bit, and that's what's great about these programs. We can bring them back to life, especially the Aussie ones, and I thought it was great to, for Bomber to be really invested in it and interested to see the results and everything else. I'm sure, Leicester really well. What was the feedback from the Ellis camp?
Yeah, from Leicester's family, it was very positive. They tuned in and they enjoyed the program. They found it educational in parts as well, despite the fact that obviously it's their father's story.
Yeah.
Leicester's not the type that'll watch anything online. If it was broadcast on TV, there's maybe a 20% chance he would actually tune in. But online, you got him completely lost. But the family watched it and were appreciative of how complimentary both of us were to the market.
Well, it was really hard for me because Bomber's obviously a really good friend and an ex-Olympic teammate, but Leicester was my first ever hero, and I loved him and still do. But at the end of the day, it's just an opinion. It's not a favouritism sort of thing. It's just who we thinks would have won and why. So I'm glad that they both saw the good side of it.
Yeah, definitely. It takes a little bit of the pressure off.
Exactly. Am I welcome at the Ellis events down the track? I'm not going to. There's no hard feelings there.
No, you're fine.
All right, good. All right, mate. Well, let's get back onto this week's fight, of course. Let's start with Diego Corrales, 14-5, 33 KOs. See the world titles there. The IBF Super Featherweight in 99, WBO Super Featherweight in 04, WBO Lightweight in 04, and the WBC Lightweight in 05. He's had a heap of big fights. But you can see there some of the biggest ones he had, especially, of course, against Jose Luis Castillo. And you throw Mayweather in there as well. So probably a little bit like Arturo Gatti. Mike is one of those guys you just love to go and fight because you just didn't know what you were going to get.
Yeah, and the thing is, he had real good boxing skills too, especially when he started training with Joe Goose in later career. The second bout, the rematch with Yoel Casamayor, he went out there and jabbed Casamayor's head off for 12 rounds. It was a real big kind of shift in how he fought. Even that title-winning effort at 135 against Acelino Freitas, he went in and beat up Freitas, but he did it with good skills and pinpoint punching from the outside. Corrales was one of these guys, about 5'10 and a half, 130, 135 pounds, but he liked to fight on the inside and actually knew how to shorten up and throw a real sharp short hook, sharp short right uppercut. So he knew how to control the range, and you see it here. This gives you kind of a sense, just those little steps create his range, but he could actually box a little bit from the outside too.
Yeah, look, he's one of those real awkward sort of fighters. Almost not that he was as brutal as someone like a Carlos Zarate, but the same sort of thing where they're tall, they're big for their weight, but they don't box. They stand there and they try and take you out.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's overwhelming because he's got the ability to jab and box and keep you at range, but he really wants to get in there and throw down. And if you look at kind of the earlier fights in Corrales' career, I mean, Mayweather obviously was just way too classy and couldn't miss him with the counter left hook. But the early fights in his career, Gary St. Clair gave him one of his toughest fights because Gary kept rolling and moving and catching. But if you were prepared to stand in front of him, he's the wrong guy to stand in front of.
Who did he start training with, Mike? I know obviously ended with the Goosens. Who was his first trainer?
Well, he went through so many trainers in his career. Yeah, he had Dickie Wood for a period of time.
Did he?
Then
that would have been eventful.
Yeah, then he had his father-in-law. Then, of course, I mean, he went through so many different guys, but really Goosen is the one that he settled with the best. He was with Eddie Mustafa Muhammad for a period as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's easier just to kind of note who the key trainers were in his existence, which the main one towards the end, and really Post-prison, which was about 2002,
Mm-hmm.
post-prison, his key trainer really was Joe Gerson.
I still remember, and you can see him being there, Robert Garcia there as well, of course.
Yeah.
Great trainer these days. But what I still remember the Castillo fight in that, and was it the 10th round? He stopped Castillo, and him going back to the corner after losing the mouthpiece, and Goosen saying, "You got to show me something," and he went out there and got the job done. I mean, you can't deny the guy's heart.
No, he was a genuine fight, and this is the first bout with Casamigos, so knockdown here.
Another
He comes
underrated
back.
fighter was Casamigos, wasn't it? I mean, not to real boxing fans, but this guy's fought and beat a lot of very, very good fighters over the years. Just to get off subject a little bit, by the way.
Oh, he was so slippery and so skillful, but to bring it back to subject, that's why Corrales deserves so much credit for reversing this defeat. TKO 6, and it's basically he had a severely split lip and he didn't have a second mouthpiece, and his mouthpiece was broken. That's essentially why Margaret Goodman waved that fight off. But he come back here, we see the rematch, and actually outboxes Casamigos, which no one had done to that point. Freitas had nicked the decision over Casamigos, but no one come out there and outboxed him.
What do you think was his peak period of his career, Mike? What sort of, because like you said, like Rosario, he had a sort of a couple of careers within a career, didn't he?
Yeah, I think it's that stretch of that win over Freitas, the win over Casamigos, and then the build into the fight thereafter with Castillo. I think that's really the peak of his career.
And I mean, we've done this fight on classic fights before, but geez, I mean, I'm sure all true boxing fans have seen it. Not that this footage is really good, but it's one of those fights you've just got to see to believe, don't you?
Yeah, this is a fight you just need to set aside 40 minutes of your life and go and intake one of the greatest spectacles. This is a greater spectacle than any movie you'll see because this is real life.
Yeah, and he wasn't really the same after this one. He obviously lost the rematch to Castillo, and he didn't really recover after that, did he? I mean, he only had a few more fights, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he had that rematch with Castillo. Castillo missed weight, knocked him out. Then they had a third bout established, and Castillo missed weight again.
That's right.
And the fight was called off. And then he just kind of, he sputtered out of control a bit from there. And that's why I'm saying that's where I see similarities with him and Rosario, that he just... You can take pinpoint moments of Corrales' career and say he was absolutely great on that night, but there was never really a prolonged period of his career which was just year after year stacked with quality. It was very, very seesaw, but it kind of reflected his life too.
Yeah, it did, and we'll just keep talking for a little bit longer there because we've got to see this. This is the 10th round, I think, isn't it, with Castillo? Because I mean, this just epitomises everything about Diego Corrales. He was dropped twice in this round by, I think it was both by left hooks. Castillo had him on toast, and that's what we love about boxing. And we did our classic fight with Churro Gatti as well. And these are the types of fights that just build legacy, don't they?
Oh, definitely. I mean, these are timeless fights. This is a fight that people 300 years from now will be watching and remembering both participants. So definitely it builds a legacy, and these are the kind of fights that Hall of Fame careers are born out of.
And I was at the, I know I mention it all the time, I can't help but bring it up, but the Hall of Fame induction I went to in June with the referee there, Tony Weeks, and someone said, what your most memorable fight? And this was it. And he's done a lot of big fights, so that's, again, a feather in the cap.
Yeah, and absolutely it should be. I mean, look at, you wouldn't begrudge him waving off Corrales at this point of the
right
fight.
There, yep.
Both his eyes. Knees very, very loose, wobbly. Of course, craftily spat out the mouthpiece for a second time.
Did he get a point taken off? I don't think he did he? Not that it mattered.
No, he got 2 warnings. He got 2 warnings. That was it. Great survival skills, though.
That's where Goose is saying, show me something. And then we've got to keep watching this. We can't come this far and pull it yet. But so how many fights after this did he have, Mike? Corrales?
Not many. Only.
We said about the rematch, but
yeah, only about 3 or 4.
Yeah, this is one of those fights too. You've got to watch with the sound up, and obviously watch it in its entirety. But
I'm just bringing it up.
It's amazing that Castillo, he just ran out of steam so quick. He had him down twice on the verge of stopping him. And it's almost like that was it. He'd shot his bolt, and that was it. He just seemed really start to struggle, and all of a sudden he's getting shaken by every punch that Corrales throws, and obviously it's about to be finished.
He punched himself out a little bit,
Yeah.
and this is one of those times where Corrales was down twice in the round.
Mm.
Castillo never down, but there's no doubting that that's a great stoppage.
Oh, yeah, a great stoppage. Yep, perfect. Yep.
And just to add to that note, so this was actually the last win of Corrales' career.
Oh, was it?
Three more fights, 3 losses. So he actually lost the rematch, then had his own third fight, the trilogy with Casamayor, dropped a close decision, then went up 2 weight classes, dropped the decision to Joshua Clottey, and then sadly crashed his motorcycle.
That was a little bit of the vision there. Well, let's get on to his opponent, Mike, because as I said, this is one of my favourite fighters growing up. El Chapo, Edwin Rosario, 47-6, 40 KOs. A lot of those losses come later in his career. Won the WBC lightweight title in '83 with a decision over Jose Luis Ramirez. Was a little bit controversial, and he got revenge, did Ramirez, in the rematch. The WBA lightweight title in '86, won it again in '89. WBA junior welterweight title, I still remember that fight against Loreto Garza in '91. And you can see there he's fought Camacho, Frankie Randall, Livingston Bramble. He's been there with everyone, and was posthumously voted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2006. But Mike was an interesting character, wasn't he? Because he could be so dominant in some fights and look up $1 million, but in other fights he looked the opposite.
Reckless lifestyle. That's
yeah. We had obviously a lot of problems sitting outside the ring.
A lot of drug problems, a lot of alcohol abuse, which I know the two kind of play into each other. But he was so much fun to watch, especially you go and watch his fights on the way up. Just massive power punch of both hands, especially though that left hook. To me, that left rip and that left hook combination. And here he is. This is Livingston Bramble. Bramble kind of became, they're rattling Camacho. Hector Camacho never the same after.
No, he wasn't.
Even though he defeated Rosario, he was never the same after this fight.
He went very passive after that, didn't he?
Yeah, never fought with the same flash or the same flamboyance. But like Livingston Bramble, when Rosario stopped him, was a top 5 pound-for-pound guy in ring and in KO magazine.
Yeah.
So you can't really discount that victory based on what Bramble did later in his career, which was accumulate a lot of losses.
That was Loreto Garza, that one.
Yeah, he caught Garza cold and just never let him off the hook in that fight. But yeah, devastating puncher, and really, and with both hands as well. Look at the angles he's cutting there.
Yeah, because it was funny, because that was about time, because he lost to Camacho, that controversial 12-round decision, and I think the next fight was against Bramble. I think the big fight at the time was Bramble-Camacho they were talking about, and as you said, he was top 5, and Camacho would have been around the same. Well, there's a knockout there of Bramble, but Rosario went out there and put him away in 2 rounds. It was amazing. And then, of course, as I said, with Loreto Garza in '91, went to his hometown. Garza was a WBA junior welterweight champion, was on the way. I don't think he would have been pound for pound or anything like that, but he was definitely a renowned fighter, and that's it there. And Rosario just got him out of there. I think it was in 3 rounds from memory.
Well, Garza had beaten Vinny Pazienza, right?
Yeah.
Been able to outbox Pazienza, but like I said, just Rosario caught him cold in round 1 and just never let him off the hook.
The one fight that was probably, I don't know, it was the beginning of the end or whatever, was, of course, the Chavez fight, when Chavez absolutely battered him for 10 rounds. But that was, I think, for me, more of an arrival of the greatness of Julio Cesar Chavez rather than anything with Rosario. Because I remember at the time, Rosario was at the top of his game when he fought Chavez, and Chavez absolutely took him apart. And it's actually a credit to Rosario that he was able to come back and then do this to Garza.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, his next fight went to Japan and was he in Japan or was he in Mexico? Got bamboozled by Akinobu Hironaka in 1 round, which was like the receipt comeback. And that was just kind of what we talked about, the Jekyll and Hyde of Edwin Rosario, that he could be spectacular one night and then a little wayward the next. But on this program, in assessing him, we're factoring in his best kind of nights.
His best, yeah. And you can see that was against Ramirez. We had the 2 fights. That's obviously Garza again. But, yeah, I still love watching him. And I know the fight with Camacho. At the time, it was big news because Camacho was an absolute superstar at the time. It was at Madison Square Garden. He won a very, very controversial decision, and really, when you think about it, Rosario could have really affected him. But if anything, he just went on to bigger and better things, and then obviously tragically died in '97 of an aneurysm, obviously related to alcohol and drug abuse over the years.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I mean, he was a guy that peaked young, under the same management as Mike Tyson early. So it was the combination of Bill Caden and Jimmy Jacobs. They kept him very active, very busy, built his record well. I thought that they really built him well to that first championship run. And he was in a lot of great fights. He ducked absolutely nobody. He fought Frankie Randall twice.
Beat
I
him
know
the
the
first time,
second
yeah.
fight, yeah, first time he beat him. Second loss was at 93, which
Yeah, got stopped in
again,
that one. Yeah.
again, he's post prime at that point. Really, I think that he managed to recapture some magic against Gaza, but for all intents and purposes, like you said, he was in decline from that stoppage loss to Chavez.
Yeah, well, even with that Randall fight you spoke about there, and he beat him, I think, a couple of fights before Randall beat Julio Cesar Chavez for the first time. So he obviously, was good at what he did. But yeah, as I said, I used to love watching him fight. And I still remember, like it was yesterday, watching the highlights on the news, I think it was, because again, we didn't get YouTube or live fights back then. There was no Foxtel or anything like that, or main event. Seeing the highlights of the news when he demolished Bramble, and I was just totally shocked because Bramble was again one of the top fighters. But nah, and we hate saying this, we say it too often, but rest in peace to Rosario, because there's way too many of our childhood heroes that are no longer with us, unfortunately. So, it is what it is. That's the sport we're in. Down to the important stuff, Mike. I'll let you go first. Who wins and why? Actually, no, I think I'm going to go first. You went first in the last one, didn't you?
Yeah, you go first.
Maybe I'll go first. So just because I'm not the bad guy, but look, I think, like them all, I think it'll be a hell of a fight. I think the styles of both would be very entertaining because CORRALES is going to stand in. The way he fights. Rosario doesn't, even though he could box, I don't think he would do that. I think he would try and come over the top with the overhand right and the body shots. I think it'll be a war. I think both could hit the canvas at some stage, but I think I'm going to lean with probably just a gut feel to Rosario. I think he's probably just a little bit more polished and a bit more durable. Well, it's hard to say CORRALES isn't durable, of course, but I just think that Rosario would have the angles and in and out and the speed and the kit of punches just to do enough to beat CORRALES. I'm not sure. Could be maybe a late round stoppage, but if not, a decision. But I think Rosario, for me, gets the chocolates. What do you think?
I think that with CORRALES, there's two ways to beat him. You either got to be slick and slippery and force him to rush onto something, which Mayweather was able to do at times, kept walking him onto the hook. The other way is if you don't back down to time him over the top. And that obviously is a game of Russian roulette, but I think that Rosario had the timing and the speed to be able to do that. And I think that there's probably a point in this fight where he hits the canvas, but I just think that Rosario had just a few better equipped tools in facing off against the other guys. So I think he's got a solid hook, he's got a solid right hand, but I think as exemplified in the footage we're just watching is that he cuts angles really well on the inside. His hands are just that little bit faster and his feet are a lot faster.
Yeah.
And I think that if CORRALES stands his ground and doesn't box and doesn't use his range, I think that on the inside I'd have to back Rosario in those exchanges. I just think he's got more punch variety and will create better angles to land what he needs to.
And so the result, so decision, KO?
No, I think that this is going to be a stoppage. I think probably around 7 or 8 rounds Rosario scores the stoppage, but it'll be a fight of the year type contender.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm with you. I tend to lean towards Rosario just because, like you said, he's got the angles and he was deceptively fast as well. I mean, you look at when he's fighting the likes of Bramble and Gaza. I mean, he was fast, and he dropped those bombs. And he could obviously punch. Footwork was really good, in and out. He'd off to the side. He'd attack from different angles. And I just think CORRALES could be a little bit robotic sometimes. It would really want someone to stand in front of him and trade with him. I just think Rosario's multi-dimensional type of style would be too much. But as I said, maybe late round stoppage, but probably points. I don't know. Either way, but I think Rosario gets it. But yeah, but again, Mike, this is why we do it as well. If you're out there, you're not familiar with Edwin Rosario, make sure you check him out, or his highlights, or his fights against Camacho, Bramble, Garza, Ramirez even. There's some good fights of him out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Go out and watch both guys.
Yeah.
Watch their highlights, watch their fights in full. They were both, for their short careers that they had, they were in some spectacular fights.
Yeah, no, they were, mate. No, really, really good pick, and I really like the fact that there's always a bit of diversity in the fighters we're bringing in. They don't always have to be the biggest stars. Just these two were really, really solid fighters, but maybe not the superstars. But just dream fights could be anyone. So, mate, I'm gonna leave it up to Tassie next week. Hopefully he'll be back. So I don't think he's had a turn for a few weeks. There's been a bit going on, but we're going to give him an opportunity next week and see how he goes. But I love this one. Make sure, guys, you vote on Instagram. It's on 24 hours after this goes up, so make sure you check it out and let us know who you think wins. Mike and I have both gone for Edwin Rosario, but have your say. Just do it in a respectful manner.
Yeah, exactly. We'll leave it to the fans. We'll see what they suggest.
All good, mate. Well, thanks very much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you. I know hopefully we've got you for a little bit longer before you jet off and take over the world of boxing again, but it's great to have you on, mate. Really appreciate you, your knowledge and your input, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Lyndon.
Thanks, mate.